Let the Buddha seek himself outside himself. Let the mind seek itself outside itself. And to the end of time there will be no finding. The Buddha, or rather Siddhartha Gautama, was an incredibly wealthy prince born around the 5th century BCE. He had everything a common man could ever want and more: wealth, youth, power, freedom, women, and so on. But one day he left his palace and experienced what it's like to be an ordinary citizen. He saw sickness, hunger, suffering, and death. He realized that all the things and the comfortable life he has will not last forever, and that his life, as enjoyable as it is therefore insignificant and devoid of meaning. He had what we today call an existential crisis. He left his life of a prince and embarked on a journey, which purpose was to find the purpose of life. He studied with various teachers, practiced fasting, meditation, as well as many other methods. He did that for many years, but still to no avail. One day he decided to sit under a tree, called the Bodhi tree, and meditate. After some time, he is said to have achieved the state of nirvana, which opened his eyes to the true nature of existence, in which there is an infinite past, infinite future, and all things are connected to each other. After achieving that state, he no longer wished to find meaning. He realized that meaning is but an idea created by the human mind, and so is reality. Thus, existence itself is, in a sense, the meaning of existence. We often believe that once we have everything we want, then we will be happy. But, as Buddha's life shows, this is simply not true, and a lot of people who have depression realize that truth. Everyone around them is chasing after things that will never make them happy. It creates a fundamental difference between the depressed person's and other people's perception of reality. That is why people who feel like life is meaningless are often misunderstood by everyone around them. The Buddha himself also felt like life is meaningless, and when he quit his life as a prince, his own family called him insane. One of the biggest problems that the depressed person faces are their thoughts. They often feel like their own mind is against them. It tells them that they are worthless and that life is not worth living. When they try to do everyday tasks, that voice torments them. And when they try to continue daily life, they have to persistently struggle against their own mind. Depression's influence on the mind is so strong that one may not see or feel a reason to keep on living. One of the most powerful tools that our brains have is logical thinking, but in trying to fix depression, that logic is nearly useless, and in fact, it makes the problem much worse. A German philosopher, Arthur Schopenhauer, is considered to be one of the darkest philosophers in history. His philosophy is based on a couple of simple, yet terrifying, logical conclusions. According to him, existence is based on will, one that is insatiable. If a person lives, they want things. If they get the thing they want, they are satisfied, but only for a time, until the next desire comes to them. Then they are dissatisfied again. This line of thinking suggests that no matter if the person gets or doesn't get what they want, in the end, they will be dissatisfied. Dissatisfaction is a form of suffering. That way, all things and all events in life lead to suffering. But if one were to never exist in the first place, one would have no will, no desires, which would lead to the complete lack of suffering. That is why, according to Schopenhauer and logical thinking, it's better not to live than to live. Studies have shown that about 9% of all people have depression, but another study sorted people according to their IQ and took only the top 2% of the smartest individuals. The likelihood of depression in that top 2% group was an unbelievable 36%, from which we can conclude that the smarter you are, the more likely you are to be depressed. In mental illness, your brain is what you fight against. The stronger your brain is, the stronger is your opponent. That is why it is nearly impossible to get out of misery by using logical thinking. Emotions are another important factor that people with mental illness struggle with. It may be for various different reasons, like unbalanced brain chemicals. Strong emotions greatly influence our logical thinking. For example, if you have an important exam, logically, getting stressed doesn't make any sense. Feeling stressed is a natural reaction to such situations. But if one gets really anxious, logical thinking may be completely overshadowed by emotions. It is simply the way that the human brain is wired. and it is a natural and completely adequate occurrence. The way that emotions influence logic and how logic escalates depression, the best remedy seems to be the practice of overcoming both thought and emotion. By overcoming, I don't mean ignoring or fighting them, but aiming at altering one's state of mind, detaching oneself from one's mind, and achieving a new perception of this supposedly meaningless existence. That is exactly what Buddha had experienced, and what Buddhism teaches. According to Zen Buddhism, this perspective that we have in our daily lives is the perspective of duality, where yes and no exist. The perspective on life, where the laws of logic play an important part, but that outlook on reality is not the final fact and foundation of existence. It is not the true and pure way of perceiving the world. Zen teaches that the true nature of life can't possibly be grasped in logical terms, but it is above the reality, where logic plays a part. Enlightenment is the change of perspective from logic being the law of the universe, to the mind's natural state being the law of the universe, which is the true and actual state of things. The only thing that changes during enlightenment is the perspective that one's mind has. The overcoming of logic is a crucial part of enlightenment. In Buddhism, the attachment to the duality of yes and no, and to the laws of logic, is the core reason for all suffering. When outwardly a man is attached to form, his inner mind is disturbed. But when the attachment is done away with, then its original nature, which is pure and quiet, prevails. The primary goal of Zen monks is always to make their students escape the prison of logical thinking, thus breaking their chains and setting their minds free from any forms of bondage. This is not an easy task, and even some Buddhist schools don't seem to quite grasp the true meaning of that statement. When we say don't have any attachment, it has some very complicated implications. If one wants to achieve the state of enlightenment, then one is attached to the notion of enlightenment. If one meditates in order to achieve enlightenment, then one is operating in the terms of logical thinking. We tell ourselves, if I meditate, then I will achieve enlightenment, which is perfectly logical. But as we discussed before, in order to achieve a higher state of consciousness, one needs to overcome logical thinking. That is precisely why Zen masters teach that all thoughts need to be done away with. This is called the doctrine of no mind. Not to have any thought stirred up by the outside conditions of life, no matter if they are good or bad. As long as there is a dualistic way of looking at things, there is no emancipation. Light stands against darkness. The passions stand against enlightenment. The main point is not to think of things as good and bad and thereby to be restricted, but to let the mind move on as it is in itself and perform its inexhaustible functions. This is the way to be in accord with the mind essence. The above quote by a Zen master, Hui Neng, explains the state of mind of an enlightened person. However, achieving the state of enlightenment is not necessary to better one's mental state. The greatest merit of the Buddhist line of thinking is not in the pursuit of enlightenment, but the changing of one's perspective on life. One doesn't have to completely get rid of any thoughts in their mind in order to get better mentally. Moreover, taking one's time and slowly learning to take control and distance oneself from one's thoughts is the right way of approaching the Buddhist practice. How should I prepare myself in order to be in accord with the samadhi of formlessness? The master said, disciplining yourself in the study of mind is like sowing seeds in the ground. My teaching in the Dharma is like pouring rain from above. When conditions are matured, you will see the Tao. The above quote instructs that one shouldn't focus on attaining enlightenment, but on cultivating the right mindset, discipline, and practice in order to condition the mind to achieving that state. There are many stories called koans, intended to illustrate the Zen state of mind. They are designed specifically to free a person from the logical, dualistic way of thinking. Thus, they often don't seem to make much sense, but that is exactly the point. A monk asked Ling Mo, "What is the beginning and end of existence?" The master replied, "Tell me how long this present moment has gone on." The monk said, "I am unable to follow you." The master replied, "I have no room here to cherish questions like yours." The monk asks a question about the past and the future. He clearly thinks in a dualistic way. The master points to the fact that past and future are just ideas of the mind, and that the only thing that truly exists is the present. The question, "Tell me how long this present moment has gone on," is a perfect summary of the Buddhist mindset. Our mind is unable to tell when exactly the present turns into the past. The only thing that we actually experience is the present. Our mind is attached to the dualistic way of looking at existence. The goal is to transcend duality and look at life from a different, not logical, but more practical, actual, and hands-on perspective. Instead of thinking about the past and the future, one should clear one's mind and focus on experiencing the present. That way, the thoughts can't sway the person's perspective on reality. The Buddhist antidote to depression is the letting go of attachment, the letting go of thoughts. Our thoughts tell us different things. They may tell us that we're worthless, or that life is not worth living, or that this world doesn't make any sense. But when one gets a hold of these thoughts, one may realize that meaning or anything else that the thoughts ask for is actually not needed for existence. The negative thoughts and the suffering of a person with depression are very serious, actual, and genuine. But Buddhism teaches that you should not always trust your brain. Your brain thinks in a dualistic way. Buddhism is all about transcending that line of thought. Through meditation, when you clear your mind of thoughts even for a short time, you may realize that the negative voice in your head becomes quiet. Even if you don't achieve the state of enlightenment, once you experience the state in which your mind is at peace, it can help you get a new perspective in which you don't feel worthless. You don't feel like you should end your life, but simply exist while listening to your breath.